so often we see these far left-wing radical protests. They do an occupation and then it descends into drug abuse, violence, and madness and squalor. But with the convoy, when left alone without government intervention, a community grew. The streets were being cleaned. They had community events. The homeless were being fed. And for me, I saw this and I thought, yeah, that's why. that's why people like me believe in smaller government, is because the convoy demonstrated what happens when there's no overarching government and people are just left alone. They do form their own community. Is that what you saw? That was my viewpoint on the outside looking in, is they created a community in 3 weeks on the streets of Ottawa.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, we all saw, I think it was last summer when they founded Chaz or CHOP or whatever it was, that the left-wing autonomous zone in Portland or something like that. Or Seattle, they're all the same, Portland or Seattle. But yeah, I mean, it was when conservatives do that, it ends up being a more desirable place than the city around it. Whereas when the liberals do it, it ends up becoming this godforsaken hellhole that no one in a million years would want to go into. And that was the thing here. Like, they had arranged their own garbage disposal routine where, they would collect all the garbage from inside their little perimeter, and then they drive it to the outskirts, and then the Ottawa City Police or the Ottawa City trash collection people could pick it up from there. They were doing their own snow removal in this little section. So it is interesting that they did take care. And even those stories we talked about earlier, like the War Memorial and the Terry Fox statue, when these stories emerged, the convoy then all of a sudden started protecting these places. They had a team cleaning up and dusting off the Terry Fox statue. They had a bunch of veterans that were shoveling the snow and making sure that the area around the War Memorial was always tidy. And I remember the first thing I saw when I got there was how all of the garbage cans were full and there was no garbage anywhere else, which is not even like Canada Day in Ottawa, where there's just trash everywhere at the end of it.
Yeah, it was, I just remember those images of Chaz, and they couldn't keep the plants alive in their community garbage. And then when you look at the convoy, they're feeding everybody, including the homeless. And I thought, that's exactly the reason.
They had a pig roast. They had a pig roast. They were frying chicken wings. They had hot dog, all of it. Anything you wanted, they had.
Now, I want to ask you, because we hear so much about how the people of Ottawa hated having the convoy there. I know there are some of those people out there, but I don't think they were really the overwhelming. I don't think they were the mainstream, or were they?
It's tough to say. I mean, there were undeniably people whose lives were disrupted by this that lived in Ottawa, whether it was employees that worked at the Rideau Centre, which closed down, or people who lived in some of the residential streets where the trucks had parked. But one of the things that was interesting that I learned in writing this, because I did just hours and hours and hours of interviews with organizers and other people involved in this, was how the city and the convoy organizers were working very significantly to get the trucks off of the residential streets to downtown Ottawa or even outside the city. And it was never the convoy's intention to go to these streets. They ended up there because police had shut down access to downtown and there was no room to go. So trucks just kind of said, well, I can't go anywhere, so let's just stop here. And it was really an accidental protest in some of these areas. So people on these streets were definitely disrupted, but the convoys and the truckers were trying to work with them and trying to mitigate that. And people were affected by the honking, but that was a problem that was really dealt with very quickly by that class action. And the one little bit from the book I'll give you that I found interesting, pretty much every organizer I spoke to was so grateful when the judge issued that injunction because they were fed up with the honking too.
Oh no, I've attended some of these protests and you go home and you can still hear the honking.
Yeah, you bolt up at like 3 a.m. because you heard like a phantom honk. Yeah, that happened even that night. The first night in Ottawa in the hotel, I like bolted up in the middle of the night and I was like, did I dream that or did a truck horn honk? I still don't know.
Yeah, it's just a low, like if you've been in the wave pool all day and you can sort of still feel the waves splashing on your face. It was like that with the honking. Yeah. Now, I wanted to ask you, you talked to some of the protesters. I'm assuming you probably talked to Tamara Litch. I don't know because I haven't been able to read your book yet because it's 11 days till it's released. Did you talk to Tamara Litch? And if so, what was did she tell you about her experience on the inside of the prison system.
So I talked to a lot of organizers and volunteers, and some of them I spoke to before I even started writing the book, and I had access to those interviews, and others I spoke to over the course of it. And one thing I'll remind you is that there are a lot of people that I would love to speak to that I just couldn't legally speak to because of their bail conditions. So I have had conversations with Tamara Leach. She is in the book, but because of those bail conditions, I haven't actually been able to do like a formal sit down with her since she was released from jail.
You know, and that's really been terrible. Her bail conditions were recently just adjusted so that she can go to Ontario to deal with some family issues. But they are still treating her like she is a monster. She cannot go anywhere near the downtown core in Ottawa because the judge said it might be too traumatic for people to see her little blonde face wandering around. It would somehow bring back the phantom honks of yore. Oh, hey, what you just saw there is a clip from my weekly full-length show, The Gun Show. It airs on Wednesday, but this is the internet. You can watch it whenever you feel like. You just have to become a subscriber to our paywalled premium content. Just go to rebelnewsplus.com to become a member today.